And we're live. Welcome back to the weekly Roundup. We're going to start over with Teresa today because we've had a lot of conversation going on around some of the similar subject matter in the YC. But Teresa, why don't you get us started?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. So there was a topic coming up a lot lately for me with several of my clients, and then it seems it's coming up with some of the other coaches as well. So I wanted to talk about getting help for yourself as the owner in your studio. So that could be on multiple different levels, help with cleaning, help with social media, help with your sales process, but hiring someone to help you with your day-to-day things, with your work that you do in your business. And this can be a real sticking point, I find, with a lot of studio owners. Maybe you don't have a super high profit margin right now, but you've got too much on your plate and you need to get something off your plate. And it's like, how do I do that? I can't afford to hire a full-time manager, or there's a sticking point where people have trouble figuring out, what do I have this new person do? Which of these tasks that I do can I offload to someone else? And then sometimes there's a sticking point too, where you don't want to let go. You say, no one will be able to do these things the way that I want to have them done, or it's too difficult to train someone else to do this. I have to keep doing it myself. And so, there are all these different barriers to bringing on some help. But as we've talked about in many different roundups and many different courses on the YC, the owner can't do everything. You can't, you're not an expert on everything. You can't be an expert on everything. And you don't have time ultimately to do everything really, really well. And so this is, I thought, a really important topic to discuss a little bit. I'd like to maybe pull Vicki into it next if I could, because she did a really great webinar a couple of months ago about organizational charts. And so if you just see that title, you might not think it's about hiring help, but getting your organizational chart outlined is like kind of the first step to kind of wrap your head around how you'll assign tasks to other people and how you can get other people to help you. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Vicki?
Yes, I was just trying to convert here like an hourly salary, because first of all, think about the value of your time. That we've talked about this before, and I just had a call with someone about it today, and me and her, we kind of came up with this number. It's maybe a little bit random, but that as an owner, I probably wouldn't work for less than $50 an hour. And she felt the same, that was around her value. So then when she counted the hours that she did and all of the stuff that she was doing in the business, she figured out that she's not getting that. She's getting half of that. So then you kind of have, you have an unhealthy situation, because that means that your business isn't attractive. You can't sell it as it is to someone, because it's not going to be attractive for them to go in and do all these kind of menial tasks for a menial salary. So although you might think that things are fine and you're breaking even and everything, it's not really true. So then we were discussing hiring, and she was saying how it's so different to hire someone now to before COVID. Before COVID, people used to get a lot of responses to their job ads, and now it's nothing. And I don't know, it definitely has changed, and that we do see that across the board, that you don't get as many answers. So that's where it comes in, how are you writing your job ad? You need to sell the jobs to people. You really have to sell them. You have to go into everything that you go into when you're trying to sell something, starting with what is their problem. So you keep it in mind that we're trying to recruit for maybe something that's starting with quite a low salary job. So you might, if you want a studio assistant, you want a studio manager, you're not prepared to take on a full-time manager right now. Just start with front desk studio assistant type person with a view to kind of building them up a little bit. So you're recruiting for someone that's maybe quite low wages. So what's their motivation? What is their problem right now in their job? What is it? An uninspiring work environment that doesn't feel meaningful? What is their problem? What do they want? They want to help people. They want to be around like-minded people. They want to feel that what they do is meaningful. What's their aspirational identity? You've got to go into all of those things in your job ad. You really have to sell the job, like creating a landing page or a blog post, something like that also has pictures. Hey, why not a testimonial? Like, just throw it all in there to really sell them the job. So I think there's been like a big shift from before COVID, where it was maybe a lot easier to get people. So yeah, lots of people have their hands up. Everyone has things to say. I'll leave it to you guys.
She let us like fight it out. Okay, I won. It's such a good point, Vicky, about like it being different now. And it made me think, we live here in Playa del Carmen, and there are tons of digital nomads. There are Americans, Canadians, like tons of English speaking people who are looking for jobs. So this may be a different way of thinking about hiring help for your studio. There are definitely situations where you need somebody in person, right? You need a front desk staff, you need a studio assistant to like run errands and like make phone calls and stuff like that. But maybe and I know that there are many owners out there who actually like being in the studio day to day, but they don't like doing the tech stuff. And that's totally valid. Like, while you don't ever want to have to be in your studio every single day, if that's the part of your job you enjoy, and all the other stuff that's taking up a lot of your brain power you don't enjoy, you could take that time off your plate, spend the time that you like interacting with your community and stuff, and then still have, end up working less hours in general. So think about, if that's you, like, what can you hire remote help for? Can you have somebody write your emails? Can you have someone handle your website? Can you have someone, like, maybe, you're taking the pictures for your social media because you're there, but they're actually like scheduling things out. So that's, one place where I think, while we may see a decrease in like people looking for in-person jobs, that may seem harder to find. I think there's more people digitally looking for work out there. And, another, like, on that point is, if you're looking in your community, I just got an email from a studio who is like hiring a marketing assistant or something like that. And one of their criteria was, you must be an active, engaged part of our community who attends class here multiple times a week. Well, okay, but if you're limiting who you're hiring to your community, they probably already have a job if they're paying for yoga right now. So see if you can like reach outside of that for some things.
I totally agree with what Kay's saying. And also, we've talked about this before.
Shit. Sorry, I muted Terry. I meant to mute myself. The squares
that's
moved.
okay. I was like, what? I got the mic
I didn't know I could do that.
She's like, no, I don't want to hear this.
I don't want to hear Terry. All right.
Up a whole new roundup to us, you guys. Watch out. Don't piss me off. Okay, go, Terry.
Don't mute you. I would say that, to Kay's point, is always be hiring, always be looking for teachers, always be looking for staff. And I have a couple of clients that have been doing this. Like Kay mentioned, having a landing page on your website and have a link, want to be part of our team, right? And, having the different job and what you're looking for with a link to submit a resume and all that kind of stuff, send it out in the email footer. So just like the best time to be advertising is for new students is when you're super busy. The best time to be trying to find help is when you have a lot of help, because otherwise I just know from experience, when you're desperate, you make really bad decisions. Those I do's are hard to undo, and those desperate I do's are never a good thing. It's sort of the same. It's a similar thing. I have to do that. So that's always be looking, always be hiring. And then the other thing, is like to Vicky's point too. One thing that I always did is, with admin time. So when you're thinking about things, is like, I always said this when pricing workshops and things like that, because I always said it's a little bit of a tangent, and I should say, so like when doing a split on a workshop, right? I always did it on the net, not the gross. And one of the things I always did was I track my time, the admin time to set up that workshop, blah, blah, blah. So that's the other thing too, is when you're looking at some of these things, maybe you're splitting revenue with someone, is track your time to get it set up and do all that stuff. And I will also say, I do have a client, to Kay's point exactly, she did hire a digital nomad to do exactly, she had her do the mind body training. So this person is learned mind body inside and out, learned marketing suites, learned messenger AI. So then the studio director wants something done. She just sends it to her VA and boom, it's done. Right. So I think to Kay's point, for certain tasks, absolutely look to hire a VA, a digital nomad. And there's lots of different sites for that in terms of where you can hire. I mean, we have a VA, we have a couple of VAs actually. So yeah, so that thinking outside of your local community is always a good thing. I guess that's my rant. Thank you.
I would add to this that this is actually why it's come full circle, in my opinion, and why the organizational chart is somehow like this new sexy thing again, and it's being talked about, and why you kind of need to have one. And it's because most people, when they go to hire, they're trying to offload some of their workload, but they don't have in an org chart a very good visualization with specificity around the problems they need solved. And that's like the primary paradigm shift that I would suggest to look at it. It's like, I'm not hiring someone to be the manager of the studio because I just need another person doing all the stuff. I would look at it more like breaking it down to the most singular function with a very specific desired outcome. I need someone to sell yoga passes. I need someone to write emails and build them in Mind Body Marketing Suite or Brandbot or Referizer or whatever. I need someone to make phone calls. I need I need someone to clean the toilet, like more specific. And then the outcome is, this is what it would look like this would be the metric we would see, and this is what it would look like if it was successful. And the idea here is when you're building the org chart, you're building the seats, their responsibility, and what the outcome of success looks like. One person can sit in multiple seats, but you as the owner, you're sitting in very often, especially in the beginning, 10 seats, let's call it. How likely is it you're going to find someone else who can also sit in those 10 seats? Or if I hire Mara and she's sitting in 5 seats, and then she decides she's moving to Bali and doesn't work for us anymore or whatever, how likely is I find someone else who's going to sit in the exact same 5 seats she's sitting in? So when it's not broken up this way, all of your hiring is about the specific individual person instead of the outcome that you're looking for. So that, to me, that's the paradigm shift. We're in a gig economy, we would call it right now. There are more people than you think out there. Kay's alluding to this with her experience in Playa, that are working, like they're unlikely to be working one job as a digital nomad. They're working 10, actually. It's not even 2 or 3, it's literally 10, because it's more gig based. So they have specialized themselves into being able to do this one thing digitally really, really well. Let's use a simple example, would be copywriting. If you're a really excellent copywriter right now, man, can you make money, because everyone needs a copywriter. People will pay big dollars for it because it's high stress, and you can literally have 50 clients like in a very short period of time. So rather than, if most organizations, yoga studios would be one, are not big enough to in-house someone with this unique specific skill. But because of gig economy, now you can effectively create that situation where you have a copywriter on staff. So you have like a small retainer with them and they do all of your copy for everything, but that's all they do. You don't need someone to be a copywriter and to be able to run your mind body system, because those are 2 separate things. So very often when we're trying to hire, we're putting out an ad for 1 hire when really it's 4. And the sort of closing thought on this would be to go back to what was already said. Like, you have to sell why someone would work with you. I actually I do agree that it's different now, higher than it was pre-COVID, but I don't think that it means what we should have been doing in 2017 to 19 was any different. It's just like literally for 5 years pre-COVID, we were screaming from the rooftops to get your digital self set up and ready to go and start doing live and recorded classes. And everyone's like, nah, it like this, just force it to happen, right? Same thing. People for over a decade in the yoga industry have had the friction point of having trouble finding really strong and good staff. Well, it's because we weren't advertising why it's so awesome to become part of the team. We were putting a job description up and asking someone to come and do the work. We were just doing the tasks. So the point is, you have to really advertise for it now, really sell what you're doing, put some like real heart into it. And I think that the narrative that it's hard to find good help is something that we also have to be aware of, because that narrative, it's just like there's a narrative that exists in the yoga world where you're like, oh, it's hard to make money as a yogi. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's not true. You can totally make your living in the yoga world. You just have to get smarter about it. It's not hard to find people. You just have to get smarter about finding them and being more specific and putting the right job ad out. The last job ad we put out, we had 250 applicants in under 24 hours from one post. So people are out there. It's just getting the right thing in front of them.
The problem today, the owner raised was getting a studio assistant. Last time I hired for that, I had 300 applications.
Yeah.
You can get applications. It's possible.
You know what, Vicky, to that point, I would say as well, think for yourselves. Like sometimes we have to flip the script and kind of put ourselves in the shoes of the person looking at it. What's more exciting? Like, oh, front desk job at yoga studio. Tasks and like hours are evenings and weekends. Tasks include cleaning, running the tech, selling, answering the phone, writing and eat, like just this huge laundry list of shit. Who would want to do that? It sounds terrible.
No, use everything you have. We even included, we have a celebrity client list because we had some famous people come to the studio. Like, well, yeah, I don't care. Just put it all in there. Whatever's going to attract the people you want.
Right, but to what you're saying, yeah, the celebrity, like the benefits, but then there's also like, what's more attractive though? This like generic job where there's all this stuff you're going to have to do and it's not really clear exactly what your day-to-day looks like, or if you were to make it more specific. What we're looking for is a client relations manager. That's who we're looking for. Job will be like primarily focused on making sure that our really lovely yoga clients feel well taken care of, welcomed, and have all of their passes and everything up to date, whatever, right? Like someone who's really strong like that. And then you can go into more job description and have other stuff in there. But like, if that more specificity is there, then when I see that as your job advertisement, I'm either that person and I want to do that, or I'm not. So just the fact that you're more specific in what you've put out filters out a bunch of people as well immediately, and simultaneously attracts people who want to do that thing.
I think we had a headline that was like, change people's lives and get free yoga. That's like, you know, really speak to what does the person you're looking for actually want, like on a deeper level than like, you know, $15 an hour and to clean the toilet. But I wanted to throw out there too, like we were mentioning, Josh mentioned the gig economy and like getting different projects done, and how like you don't need a VA necessarily to also know how to like set up your mind body. But for example, if you do need some kind of a project done or some kind of help in your studio that does take a yoga professional and somebody who knows your business and your industry, the coaches actually have a system for that. So we can do, besides your regular coaching calls, we'll actually do project work too. So you can hire a coach of your choice, like for some, you know, maybe you need someone to put things in your brand bot, like put the emails in there for you. Maybe you need someone to help you like clean up your mind body site. Just reach out to any of the coaches and we have like a quoting system for projects like that. So that can be something as well. Alex,
I think I was,
go. Or Teresa, go. So many hands.
One of the things that comes to mind, I think that when a studio is trying to hire help, so whether it's like a manager, assistant manager, or just front desk, but particularly manager, assistant manager, they're always in a reaction mode, right? They needed that manager maybe 5 months ago, a year ago. And I think the studio also has to evaluate if it's a studio that's, let's say, 36 months old versus a studio that is 12 years old. Sometimes the older studio owners, meaning they've been open longer, have to have a really hard conversation with themselves in the beginning in order to get to that defined role. They need to sit down and brainstorm and walk through like what they do, what they like to do, what they don't like to do, but particularly more importantly, what they're good at and what they're not good at. Because what you're not good at as an owner, you're probably only going to incrementally improve. What you're good at and you like, then as the leader of the space, you should be defining your role around that, and then take the rest of the tasks that need to be done in the studio to help begin to define that next role. It's also a good opportunity, like you're saying about gig work, to, if you're really looking for a manager, let's say, to also evaluate, make sure that you have all the structure in place behind your business, whether it's, your lease, your CPA, your lawyer, your payroll service, everything's in play, maybe marketing at the same time, because that foundation, it comes through your student base eventually, right? If things are unstable underneath the studio, then the studio owner or the staff or the teachers are all reactive. And then you're creating a space where maybe people not sure that it's a safe place to work. So if you have that foundation that's really solid, you can lean up against, then you're now creating a space that people want to be a part of. And then you specifically define the role and the boundaries between roles. And so that when you go to hire, you're very clear and transparent of what you're looking for. And as the owner, you've done this internal exercise to define exactly what it is you're going to do as an owner and what you're not going to do. So you feel very comfortable. You're creating freedom for yourself, right? And I would say that for younger studios, you should be starting out knowing that you're going to have an assistant or a manager in the future. And to Vicky's point, like creating that org chart and essentially that ideal org chart, so that each day, each quarter, you see this role coming to fruition. And as to Terry was saying, always be looking, always be hiring, or what have you, because that's exactly right. Like you have to continuously see in the student or that other person's personal circumstances that are going to come to fruition, where they're the perfect part-time weekend assistant or what have you. And I think that a lot of times the yoga business has become more complicated in a lot of ways because of all this tech. And it's unfair for any one owner to think that they're going to be able to do all of this, right? To teach and what have you. It was like that 15, 20 years ago to some extent, but now it's a whole different realm. And when you open, you should ask for help, right? Because burnout is huge.
And circling back to Kay's point about hiring nomads, hiring somebody to do your social media or marketing is one thing that's super easy to offload, and it's really easy to find somebody digitally. But one really important thing that you should consider when hiring somebody for your social media or your marketing is that you want to find somebody, and this is a big reason why people usually tend to go local, is because you want to find somebody who understands your business. The reason is if you hire just like some marketing company that is really good and they have really good results with their clients, they might not know the difference between Inferno Hot Pilates and Pilates, and then they're putting posts about like traditional Pilates on your social media, and that's a big no-no. And so finding somebody who understands your business and understands yoga and your classes, or has actually been a practitioner or is a teacher, can be really valuable thing to find. Otherwise, you're going to be consistently approving content, you're going to be sharing up way more information than you should, and it's not really going to take a lot off of your load. So finding somebody that actually understands your business is a really important thing to look for when you are hiring for your marketing and social media. And it's really easy to do. And there are also things to consider that a nomad couldn't really necessarily do or shouldn't do, in my opinion, is like taking pictures in your community. There's no way a nomad could do that. And then engaging with your community on social media as well is a big one, because someone who isn't in your community isn't going to know the difference if Betty is your highest spender or a yoga teacher's sister or something like that. And so when they're responding to their comments, it might come off a little weird if we don't know that person or know the connection of that person. So there's still going to be some lift from you or someone in your studio, which could be a really easy and simple job to offload, is like engaging on social media and taking pictures for the marketing person and things like that. And then of course, like sharing the information about events and all of that. But it is a really easy thing to offload. Just be mindful of the type of of the job ad when you are creating it, making sure that that person not necessarily is in your community and practices at your studio, but they understand the classes that you offer and the services that you offer, so that the content is congruent and on brand with your studio.
I also wanted to say something from Alex touched on it. Everybody's touched on it in terms of offloading tasks. And maybe you don't need a studio manager, you need somebody to do something else. And I was in that exact position, and looking at what I did really well versus things I was either didn't like to do or, didn't do so well. One of the things was, and I'll just say it, mentoring the teachers just wasn't my thing. I know some studio directors, that's what they love to do. They love to mentor the teachers. They love to do all that. Not so much me. What I realized, what I love to do was the business side of things. It's just in my DNA. So, because I'd hired a studio manager and it didn't work out at all. It didn't work out at all. And partly because I didn't really know what I wanted. So once I knew what I wanted, I realized, oh, what I want is somebody to deal with the teachers. And so I created a position. I called it the teacher liaison. I called it the teacher. It was one of my teachers was early childhood education. That was her background. She loved to create content. She loved to work with people and train people and mentor people. It was a beautiful solution. It was one of my teachers, worked great. She did all the annual job, performance evaluations. There was an issue. She worked with them, took their class, gave them feedback. We met like once a week, just a quick check-in, and that worked out really, really well. And I just paid her. We agreed upon. I was like, I didn't really know how to price it at first. I said, I probably spend this many hours a week doing it. I think I was paying her like $20 an hour. So I said, why don't we settle on this much per month? Keep track of your hours. And if it's more or less, we can adjust. I paid her monthly a salary. And then after the first couple of months, she said, I'm actually spending less time. If you want to reduce, and I said, no, I'm not going to reduce you. You've earned it. Right. And that worked out really, really well for me, having that. So sometimes thinking is, where do you need the help, the most help? And that was a really good solution for me at my studio. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. Teresa.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to talk just a second about where to start. We've talked about the organizational chart and what do you like to do, what do you not like to do, and evaluating all that. And that is a really good place to start. Writing down everything you do. Just start there. Really simple. Just write down everything that you do on a daily basis. And that's kind of like a living document, because you'll forget stuff when you first write that out. And then a couple of days later, you'll remember something else that you do and add it to the list. And then you can start to categorize it in the different categories and the different seats, as Joss was referring to them as. So, like marketing, your CEO tasks, your teacher development tasks, your student support tasks. So then you can start to separate them out. And then you can start to look at what you like, what you don't like, what you might like to offload, things like that. I've seen a few times people hire someone to help them. And then they're like, I hired someone to help me, but now I don't know what to have them do. And so I would suggest that you do what I said, outlining all the tasks, and decide what you want them to do before you even send out the job application or send out the job notice, right? Before you even start taking applicants. And then as you start to take applicants, as others have mentioned, it is going to be rare that you're going to find someone that can do everything that you want. You know, it's pretty rare nowadays that you have one person that is your helper and they do everything. So it probably will be multiple people. So when you bring in your first person, you have this list of things that you want to offload. They can maybe take A, D, and F of those tasks, right? And then so you get them started, you get them going, then you start looking for a person number 2 to take care of some of the other tasks. Because once you get someone in, then you can evaluate their strengths and what they'll be good at helping you do. And then you can assign the tasks to them accordingly. So that's a really good place to just like start, I think, is start to write down all of the tasks and start to get that organized. Even if you know you can't hire someone for another year or 2, if you start with that now, it'll make it so much easier in the long run.
This is a really great point, Teresa. It goes back to what Mara was alluding to as well, that I agree with, is very often we're hiring to get rid of something that we don't like to do task-wise, but we haven't actually built a system within the business to be able to offload it to somebody. So actually one of the first things to do, social media is the example that Mara's alluding to. It's like, well, what's your social media strategy? When do we post? How do we go there? Where do we focus our efforts? Do we engage with people? What's the metric we're using for success there? Like, if none of that's defined, how can you put someone in that seat and see if they're successful or not? Or to what Mara's specifically saying too, it's like, I don't want to do all the posting of my social media, but what I didn't realize, not me specifically, I'm saying that you might go through this thought experiment, right? Is I don't have a standard operating procedure for taking photos and videos around the studio so that I have media to offload to someone to go and post. So in hiring someone to do your social media, you invent another job in the studio. And it's just realizing that that could be the case. It's why hiring can be kind of empowering, because it forces you to reevaluate the actual systems of your business as well. And then to Teresa's point, having the person who can do these specific things, and it's like hire multiple people for that. The 2 other thoughts that I had that I wanted to add in here too was, one, the strange thing of entrepreneurship that takes time, and I feel like unfortunately too many studio owners don't quite arrive there, is that you're trying to hire yourself out of a job. That's actually the goal. If you really start nailing in your studio, at some point, there's nothing left for you to do. And that's when it gets really fun, actually, because then you plug yourself back in the places that you are the highest impact and have the most enjoyment. And there's more flexibility in everything. You can be in a more creative space. It's not that you have to get rid of, and then you sell it, Terry says. Yeah, exactly. It's not that you have to not have something for yourself to do, but like that would be the philosophy of approach, is you're trying to get to a place where you don't have to do anything. The reason you do that though, in the path, like in the midst of that type of growth, is that is how you effectively can increase your total capacity at the studio. Capacity for revenue, capacity for servicing people, like that's how it becomes bigger than you, is when you do that. But one of the questions that I'm sure will come up, and if someone hasn't commented this yet, it would even surprise me, is, okay, cool, but if I'm not making a lot of money or paying myself a lot, how can I afford to hire somebody, is always the question. So back to Teresa's like practical application comment, I would add that your first hires shouldn't necessarily be, should or shouldn't is the wrong way to word this, but for the sake of simplicity, it's like, ideally your first hires or your next hire at any point in time is, what's the biggest problem that you have that's the highest impact for business outcome? If hiring someone is purely an expense to your business, you've either hired the wrong person and or for the wrong position. Because if you hire me and I increase the total business capacity and I perform based on the outcome that you've hired me for, then you'll make more money. So I'm not an expense at that point. I'm an investment. And I should be giving you 10 to 1, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1 ROI. Mara, way back, one of our first relationships was Mara ran our retail boutique at the yoga studio. We did a lot of money in retail, but it was very laborious to stay on top of it. And we needed someone who had the creative mind for it, knew what people wanted to wear, understood the product that we had. So hiring Mara to be in that position wasn't an expense because she had the focus to do that better, so that it was offloaded from Jenna or myself. And the result was we sold like a shit ton of retail all the time. I don't think we ever dropped below 12 grand a month, ever. So it should increase your capacity and it should be an investment, not an expense. So when you're hiring, it's like, where do you, not just where do you want to get rid of something, where would it have high impact in the business? I'll tell you right now, 90% of yoga studios that I talk with, they right now in the industry, they're missing a really strong front desk staff. And staff plural, but not many, 2 people. It'd surprise you what you can do in your average yoga studio with like 2 really good front desk people plus a good owner, really sales trained or whatever. The production of that is insane. And the thought that came up on a call recently, as well as at the Moto AGM that I was talking at, was, yeah, it looks like it's expensive to hire 2 people for the front desk, except it's either that, like if you're not closing sales, or you have to train your 30 yoga teachers to be good at it and ask them to expand their job. Like, what's the path of least resistance? It's way easier to just go hire 2 people for that specific role and train the heck out of them than it is to try to get 30 yoga teachers and take their focus away from just being an awesome yoga teacher, right? All right, that's what I got for now. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I was just going to shoulder hop off of Terry. Like, you know, when Terry, you had to have that hard conversation with yourself, you know, as a studio owner, a lot of times you feel like you need to be the leader, obviously, of the building and the space, but the actual teachers in the program. And it's a hard conversation to let go. That's a letting go process. And that's really important to getting to where Josh was saying, to basically being free, right? Your business begins working for you. Most studios, when they come to coaches or whatever, they're working for their business, and they're working for their business day in, day night. Their partners are working for the business, even if they don't work in the business, because they're constantly being dragged down. So creating those systems, and maybe Teresa was saying about like where to start, like brainstorming about tasks, but also maybe you don't really have systems around your retail and about your marketing or about your cleaning staff or whatever. It's not quite there. It's kind of working, but it's not defined, right? So maybe your first hire is to hire somebody temporarily, 6 months, or somebody, even a friend, you know, somebody who's good at really organizing it and forcing you as the owner to spend 2 hours a week, and you schedule it out and you define retail system, you know, the retail sales, and then you define front desk, and you do it, you lay it out in like maybe 2 quarters. You're going to have all your systems, SOPs written down in your handbook or your manual. And then now you can begin to create a role, and you can see how what that role is exactly is going to be. Too many of us hire for help without defined role, don't see ROI, see payroll or whatever it is, and then do it again and do it again. And then we never want to do it. Right? You've got to define the role. Yeah.
Oh, couldn't find the unmute myself, but hey, Alex, it
Kate
kind
can
of
mute other people, but can't unmute herself.
exactly. It sounds almost like you're talking about hiring a business coach, Alex. I mean, you could totally hire a friend, and you could also hire a business coach, and we can help you like get those systems defined before you go out and hire people so that they don't become an expense. They're an investment. I just wanted to, because I can't believe nobody's mentioned it yet, is the book E-Myth Revisited, which I think talks about exactly what you were saying, Teresa, right? Like writing out everything that you do and then dividing it up into the different seats in your org chart. So if you haven't read that yet, it's like not super thick, not very scary. You can get it on audiobook. I'll post the link in the comments. Everybody should definitely read that. And then back to what Mara was saying, if you didn't catch the last roundup, we had a long discussion about hiring out for marketing. And if that's something you're thinking about or interested in, definitely go watch that discussion because we had a lot of great points in there. Yeah, Alex, did you want to add something? Okay.
I just dropped in there. I will admit I've been multitasking while we've been doing this. And I did a live video last night on, do you need a budget? And so that just got posted into the YC. And one of the things to start with in all of this is, as you start to define the roles in the seat and figuring out the finance part of it, is part and parcel is where's the, can I afford it? Can I afford it? Develop a budget, right? Start looking at the budget. Again, you kind of see how all of these aspects of your business tie together. The hiring, the financing, the sales, the marketing, and everything flows in. As we talk about in the YC method, it's yoga, breath to yoga is money to business. So your breath of your business is the money, and managing the money, managing the cash flow, getting the budget and all that finance, which I know for some people, it's just like, there's a simple, I posted a simple little template in there that you can use to help start with your budget. If you don't know where, just like Teresa said, and Vicky has said, with what are all the tasks, just simply do a brain dump. Same thing with your finances. Take the emotion out of just what are all the expenses I have every month, and then work to put them into some type of semblance of budget. It doesn't have to be scary. And again, to Case point, we're here to help you guys. So I always wanted to mention that as well. And yes, and I did this in a webinar this year too. Which one was that, Vicky?
About org charts.
Oh yeah, the org chart.
So that's like the whole how to do a task map for yourself.
Yes, it was brilliant.
Like even like an example of a task map, and then how to kind of break things down from there.
Yeah, you did that in July, right?
Yes, I think
yes.
It was July or August this year.
Yeah, so if you go into the YC and you look under in the courses, and then go to the webinar recordings, if you have the package that includes that, yes, is August. What everybody ought to know about organizational charts.
That's the one.
That's the one. So I wanted to go back to something Alex was mentioning too. I like the idea of having someone there for like accountability to like sort of just make you have it scheduled in, and the accountability to like write it all out and figure out and define what the seat is. The other approach that you could take that's basically the same thing, but just from a slightly different angle, is sometimes we don't know how to define the role. And that is part of the entrepreneurial journey, right? Being an entrepreneur is this perpetual state of learning and expanding your knowledge and understanding, not so that you can do it, but so that you're more effective at offloading it to someone else. If you understand sales, you can hire a good salesperson. If you have no clue about sales at all, you'll struggle hiring a good salesperson because you don't know. So you don't have to be the best, but you have to have a basic level of understanding. And to what Alex is describing, that would be part of that journey potentially. Alternatively, or maybe I should say additional to that, this is why having really simple basic things like, okay, we have an org chart, we know the outcome. I don't know how we're going to get the outcome, but I know what the outcome is. And then I have a regularly scheduled meeting strategy for my team. Those things alone could let you hire someone, because let's suppose we're like, I need someone to be the retail manager. I know that what I need is for the retail to have X profit margin and us to make X per month as the goal. I don't know how we're going to do that, but then I also have, but that's the seat's outcome. I also have a regular scheduled system of like, we set quarterly goals. We do a weekly or a bi-weekly sprint where we have quick task discussion. We have an annual planning meeting. That means I have a system in place that I can hire someone to be the retail manager, and I can say to them, the first job for the first 6 months to a year is for you and I to work together to develop a system for how we achieve this goal. Because I think the other thing that happens, and Alex is making this point, if we don't have the role totally defined, then it's hard for us to just give it to somebody else and expect them to be successful. But on the other hand, you could approach, and it's probably specific to the specific job or role that we're talking about. But if you hire me to, increase the number of intro pass sales you have at your studio, we use something really hyper specific for the sake of the argument, and I make that happen. You're like, Josh, I need it to go from 50 a month to 100 a month. And then I do that. And as long as the strategy that I'm implementing isn't like debranding you, it isn't doing something totally weird, like just only giving them away for free, whatever. Do you really care how I got there? Like sometimes the thing is it doesn't matter. Like the specific strategy is less important than the outcome within a certain parameter of like on brand and tone and feel or whatever too. So that would be the only other thing I would add is sometimes we create extra complication as a reason, like the lack of definition. We use that as the excuse to not hire. We use that as the excuse to procrastinate around it, because we look at it like, oh, well, there's so much more work I'm going to have to do to be able to hire, so I'm just not going to do it at all. And then 3 years later, your business is in the same place. So a lot of the ways we break through that is get that accountability person in place, like Alex is saying, and do the work. But then also sometimes you got to just start to figure out what you need to what you need to do. So yeah, jump in there, Alex.
Yeah, I was just thinking when we thought about, like you said, fear, right? Like fear can come in, or being overwhelmed can just stop an entrepreneur from like moving forward and making the first step. But also, I think the key too is if you're always looking, always hiring or what have you, you have to make these roles, essentially these systems, repeatable, right? And so much of this is we're helping businesses like 3, 5, 7 years in. They're going back and looking behind their business and trying to like organize all this stuff that came forward in sort of an organic system, and it's not really defined. And so for the newer studios out there, needing help now, 12 months in, they should be asking themselves hard questions. Do they have all these systems in place? Do they have at least like a vision board of so to speak of areas of potential growth? And how are they going to structure this? Because really, a lot of businesses that are not yoga studios do this ahead of time, right? And then the yoga studios go out there and they're the teacher and the 17 hats and the marketing person and the babysitter and all these different things. And then they throw their hands up there and are confused. So getting to it ahead of time, right? Getting their tech system set up, getting their, liabilities covered, but then getting their roles defined right from the beginning that are repeatable, because change is inevitable. People leave,
I wanted to go back to what Josh was saying about like, maybe you don't even need to have it completely defined how they're going to get to the outcome. You're definitely going to define the outcome and what you want so that you know who to hire and what you're hiring them for. But like the specific steps, maybe you don't even care what they are. And I'm actually going to be doing a webinar in the YC in December, I think, right, Terry, about how to motivate your staff. And one of the really, I'm going to give away part of it, but you guys should still come because it's going to be great. I'll mute people out of nowhere. So one of the key ways to actually motivate your staff and keep your staff motivated is making sure that they have a degree of autonomy in what they're doing. So from the beginning, if you have a little bit, like you have the general idea of the role, but you hire someone that you can entrust to actually figure out the specifics, that already from the start makes them more motivated and engaged in what they're doing and working for you. So that is just a win-win for everybody.
Okay. Hashtag Terry's dad.
Yes.
We can't have a roundup without a hashtag.
We needed one. I was waiting for it.
Hashtag Terry's dad is, my father always used to say, and this goes to everything we're talking about, is if you were to walk out of your business at the end of the day and something were to happen to you, somebody could walk in the next day and pick up and keep going on. The business would survive. And so the point is, nobody, Alex, you know, every change is inevitable. The other thing is, nobody's irreplaceable, including yourself, if you set up your business that way. If you set up the business where everything hinges on you, that's not a good thing, right? So it's like, at the end of the day, could someone come in tomorrow and keep my business running? Hashtag Terry's dad. Then you have a job. Exactly.
Yeah. Buying yourself a job. That's the thing to potentially avoid. If you want to just buy yourself a job, that's fine. I always look at it like you should just build your business how you want it to be. And that's allowed to change too. You know, a lot of the things we're suggesting, if you're just like, I just want to own a yoga studio where it's me and one other teacher and I just do all the shit and that's it, and you're totally happy with that, cool. But then you have to choose to be totally happy with that as well. That's very often not the case. The vision is something bigger than that on a personal note. But all right, you guys, we're coming towards the end here, but one of the things that we were going to bring up really briefly, and I'm sure there'll be more discussion on this, is the other place that hiring happens is in the technology in your studio. So we were discussing before we jumped on, in case you missed it, we had a post in the YC, Mind Body Online, probably the, you know, definitely the juggernaut of platforms in the yoga space in terms of what you use for studio management. They laid off a large portion of their workforce, and they're doing a bit of a restructuring and stuff. And there's a lot of potentially really positive things that'll come out of that, which I think Teresa will pipe in on. But I think the other thing to consider now is that when you're looking at your org chart, you might not actually put a tech partner on your org chart, but there is some element of you're hiring through tech. One of the things throughout the years, especially recently, that's been a big discussion is the expense element of it, and how people are like, oh, I don't want to spend, I'm spending $300, $400, $500, $800 on tech. That's actually pretty low still. I mean, it's not uncommon to have, you know, $1,000, $1,500, couple grand a month, easy. There's even singular platforms that cost more than that as your tech. And it goes back to the same thing. If we can hire someone and it increases the total capacity and output of the business, positive ROI. If you can hire tech, if you can use tech to solve a problem and it increases the total capacity, then it's a valid expense. The most obvious one is like automated email marketing. What we can build in BrandBot, Marketing Suite, Refrise, or whatever else in terms of how much it can do automatically in a month, you'd have to hire 10 people to just accomplish the same thing, and they probably mess half of it up because it's complicated. So the expense of a few $100 a month for a platform like that is not an expense. It's insane how powerful that is.
Am I supposed to chime in with the positive?
Terry?
No, I was just saying, mic drop.
Teresa, you were commenting before about some of the commentary, because there was a meeting yesterday with a lot of the consultants and stuff at MindBody just around this restructure and what they're focusing on. So pivoting to that, like, you know, this is something that you're partnered with and that you run your business through. So how they run their business, how they structure their business, who's on their team, it does matter. It does directly impact you, which is why it's of interest. So what were you saying about just where you see some positive direction or whatever on the backside of something like this?
Yeah, so they mentioned that they're going to be focusing a lot of effort in the functionality of the software. Because we all know that with MindBody, there have been issues with outages, with certain things not working, certain different areas like branded app and the core software and branded web and the MindBody app all not communicating with each other properly and things like that. So there's been issues there. So that was the real positive, is that they're making some of these changes so that they can focus on the functionality of the software. And the first thing that they said that we would see improvement with is outages, because there have been a lot of outages lately, sometimes with the core software, sometimes with the add-ons. So they said that that was the first thing that they were focusing on. So they were cutting a little bit of the extracurricular stuff, because the point was made, you can't run a software company if you don't have software that works, right? So it's a really good point. So so they're focusing on that, and focusing on, there's the new mind body experience, but they're focusing on some of the underlying structure of the software that has been the same for years and years and years and years. That's why mind body, the core software, looks like it's from the 90s, right? And so they're going back, and that he made the point that the software improving has been promised for years, and now it's going to really happen, he said. So fingers crossed. We'll see how it goes.
And they also said, to Teresa's point too, at 3 to 5 times the speed it has been.
Yes.
Right.
They're taking, like Teresa's point was really well taken, some of the extracurricular stuff that we all love, but they're going to be channeling those resources to the underlying architecture of the software.
This to me, and this is a whole nother discussion that I don't think we'll go too far down the rabbit hole on right now, but when you're using any software, MindBody as the example here, these sorts of moves, they lay off 30% of their workforce. We're like, oh my gosh, like that must be a terrible thing. Well, actually, it might indicate a really positive thing. It sucks for the people who were there, because many people that we know that we're friends with, that we had a relationship with, they've been there for over 10 years. Like, they just lost their job. That really sucks. But there's been a lot of issues with the core product. And this is a long-winded way of getting to how the business is structured itself, the business running the software. The software is just the product that we buy, but there's behind the scenes all the people and the strategy and structure of the whole business around the software. That really matters. And we've seen it with a lot of tech partners throughout the years, a lot of frustration. If you were to categorize the frustrations, many of them, I would venture to say the majority, you would categorize them into, it's their behind the scenes business structure that's the fundamental issue, actually. So something like this, is as hard as that is, if it means that you're kind of cutting areas and Vicky, and focusing in on spending all of your effort, time, finance, team focus, etc., on the core product and making it better, and really in the end why it's there versus events or whatever else, that can be a really positive indicator that could really be impactful. So these are the hard things. Years and years ago, a mentor of mine at the time bought a yoga studio, and he did one of the most abrupt yoga studio changes I've ever seen, where he rolled in and literally just fired everyone. He called a staff meeting, bought the studio, called a staff meeting, came in and said, all right, no one here is working here anymore. We're under new ownership and management. We're restructuring everything. As of tomorrow, I will accept applications for anyone to work here. And he ended up losing. It pissed off everybody. He lost half the team. But what shook out the other side was people who really wanted to be there and were really going to be on board with the new plan. And so sometimes you've got to do those really kind of like abrupt things in order to refocus on the stuff that really matters and get things working properly again. So to be seen. Okay, send us off today. Final thoughts, and then we'll bounce.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to mention one other positive thing from that meeting yesterday is that they did say that they're going to keep the consultant program alive. And as you may know, most of the coaches, or I think all of our current coaches now, are mind body consultants. And so while that doesn't mean that we're like affiliated or like get paid by MindBody in any way, or even get referral fees or anything, we've been through a certification course with them, and we really understand that software. So the positive for business owners is that they reach out to the consultants to get feedback. And we, even when they don't reach out, right, we give them the feedback that we get from you. And so MindBody uses that, and it's positive that they recognize the importance of that relationship so that they can continue to have that line directly to you guys through us. So that's a really positive thing too. And that will help them prioritize like where they're working on the software so that they actually fix the things that matter to the business owners.
So to Kay's point, in the MindBody crew, in the YC, if there's certain things, post them in there. And
Totally.
let's use that crew to, because you've got all these consultants and we know the peeps, we can be funneling, say, hey, here's what and we've got a great representation across yoga. So let's put that all in the MindBody crew and we can start making our voice heard even more powerfully.
Definitely.
Well, I would just say this is true across any platform as well. We have a direct in with Walla, we have a direct in with Moments, we have a direct in with Wellness Living, like any of the standard platforms that anyone's using, plus or minus a couple for running your yoga studio. We do have contact line in there. So we do send this stuff to them. They do ask. There have been cases where they've hired me or other coaches to consult on like direction of their product or whatever, because they want to know how to make it better for yoga studio owners. So yeah, I think that's part of the formulation of the Yogapreneur Collective in itself as well, is how do we get the benefit of a larger organization through the autonomy, with the balanced autonomy of your individual businesses. So, all right, that's it for today. Have a great weekend.
Go do some yoga.
That's it for
Knock
now.
it out.
Go do some-